Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the second 60th anniversary Doctor Who special, this being Wild Blue Yonder. Great Doctor Who special. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're picking up the moment the dude's out there on his own. It's 1666, and he's under the tree. I'm like, that's not who I. And it's like, yes, it's Isaac Newton. And I love that the Doctor and Donna are there. And just as he discovered gravity, like they came swooping by, all these apples fell on him, and he's just like flabbergasted by the chip. They're like, "Oh yeah, where are we?" She spilled some coffee on it, and she's like, "Yeah, it's a time traveling machine, so he's gonna have eternity to be mad at me." It's like, "Oh no, I'm not going." It's like, "Wait, who are you? Like, where are we? What year is it? 1666? Wait, 1666?" And a guy with a like apple in his hand, like, "Wait, are you Sir Isaac Newton?" It was like, "Sir Isaac?" He's like, "Oh no, spoilers." But it's like, "Oh, I bet you've." And I love Donna's like, "Wait, if you're Sir Isaac Newton, then that means," he's like, "Donna, don't." She's like, "No, that would mean that he's Donna, don't." And it was like under the gravity. I forgot the phrasing she used a very common enough colloquialism. And it's just kind of like, and they both said it at the same time, being super cheeky. But like, they kind of screwed history up because it's like, oh, he couldn't remember the word properly. So instead of gravity, the word is now mavity. Which I even love later on, Donna says mavity. And the Doctor kind of looks at her and he goes, yeah. So it's like, I guess because of the way he works as a Time Lord, he remember, because later, like they bring the bit back near the end of the episode where he says gravity. She's like, what? He's like, I mean mavity. So he must remember that was originally gravity, but maybe it's just like, no, like I'm saying the word wrong. Maybe some part of his brain is trying to remember what it originally was, but he's like, no, mavity is the right word. It's, I don't know why I slipped up and said gravity. On some subconscious level, his brain is trying to reconcile with that. But like the fact that he gave Donna that look made him go like, he was like, wait, that sounds weird, but it's like, no, mavity's the word. Like, I don't know why I'm getting so caught up in that. No, definitely the right word. But the TARDIS had quite the crash landing. I mean, it literally like smashed into a wall and kind of like left an imprint. They come out of the TARDIS. It is breathing fire like a dragon, and it's just kind of, I love how the Doctor's so frustrated because he looks on the inside. He's like, oh, it was just new. And Donna's like, I'm sorry. He's like, nope, not your fault. She's like, no, it is, but you'll fix it, right? And he's trying to. So they're trying to get back home, and they're stranded here. They don't really have any idea where they are, like of course they would in typical Doctor Who fashion. What I think is so interesting about this episode too, and I should also point this out while it's on the top of my head, is I think it's so fascinating when you have episodes like this where, I mean, Doctor Who always has like a very small cast. Like you have a small cast of like characters with dialogue and stuff like that. Like you'll have your core cast of an episode, but you have these very, very rare occasions where it's an even smaller cast. In this particular case, I'm sure there has been instances of it just being the Doctor and the companions, but usually, like I said, there's like 3 or 4 other characters with them. Even if it's just like, hey, there's only 3 or 4 other characters in an episode, it's still them alone with the companions. It's very, very rare that you just get the Doctor and the companion, whoever it may be, by themselves. It's just so interesting that this episode, like 95% of this episode just revolves around the Doctor and Donna, which I think is so, I think they structured this particular special this way to kind of compensate for like, right, there wasn't a lot of alone time between Donna and the Doctor. They got a little bit alone time when it was kind of down to the wire. There was no real time when she had to become Dr. Donna again, but obviously we're catching up with Donna, finding out about her family life and juggling that and kind of the antics of everything that was going down with the meat last episode. But it's just like, right, we were in this adventure, we didn't have any time to talk, and now we have this opening, which is kind of a little slower before we really get into the nitty gritty what the episode is. But it's like, it's slower, and let's take time to talk, which is even something Donna says where she's like, yeah, you never want to just talk. It's always on to the next adventure, because it's like, oh, you're kind of always running to the next thing. It's like, well, that is the Doctor. The Doctor's been running their entire life. Whether they've known about it or not, it's always been some core part of them where it's just like, yeah, subconsciously I've always been running, and that's why I never want to stick around. It's kind of encoded in the Doctor's DNA and personality, and it's once that's kind of encoded in you for as long as the Doctor's been around, it's like when that's been encoded in you for like a millennia, of course that's going to be a hard habit to break out of when it's kind of become foundational to who you are. You know, the Time Lord that stole a TARDIS, but you know the TARDIS would always say, "No, I'm a TARDIS that stole me a Time Lord." So it's just kind of interesting, like kind of runaways in both their own capacities in some ways. But there's this whole situation with this robot in the distance. They're wanting to go investigate, but then also the place is shifting around. Then the TARDIS leaves because it was basically rebooting itself. A program in it called VIDS. Basically, anytime it detects danger, the TARDIS will leave until the danger is resolved, and it'll come back. Obviously, the Doctor's like, dude, I turned that off for like years ago, but I guess now because it was rebooting, a lot of the stuff that was off is now back on. So that means there's something dangerous here that would scare away the TARDIS. It's like, yeah, but they eventually find some computers, they check out, and it seems there's no life forms on board. Then you got the whole airlock situation, which I figured from the beginning, like on airlock opening 3 years ago and it closed behind, I was like, someone killed themselves. I figured that's exactly what that was. But the context would be like, well, even with that thought early on in the episode, it's still a question of, well, what were they dealing with, and why was that the only option? We get this interesting development where we find out where exactly they are. They're on a spaceship on the edge of the universe, which the Doctor's like, right, it's something hard for you to comprehend. He's like, not trying to say that you can't comprehend it now, but it's just like, not as an insult, it's just until you get to a certain specific, what was that, particular math or whatever, then you'll be able to understand it. But it is kind of this hard concept to think about and kind of like visualize and kind of like fully wrap your mind around of like, right, the universe is as big as it is, and it contains everything, and then when you find the edge of it, because even Donna's like, where are the stars? And he's like, there is, like, your home, Earth, is like 12 trillion, or no, it might even 14 trillion. It's something in the double-digit trillions of miles away. And it's like, light moves so fast, so you should be able to see it. It's like, yeah, but it's so far away here on the edges that there is nothing, which there's something beautiful yet also scary about it, because the Doctor's like, yeah, I mean, there's like literally nothing here to protect me. Like the darkness that is the universe, is just, the edge of the universe is just there, and the nothing. Because even the Doctor's never really traveled out this far, and there, like I said, there's something beautiful and scary about it. And I think that's so interesting too, because it folds into the episode, because the episode is unnerving and creepy, especially with like, that was so well done too, where it's like, all right, Donna's doing something which she doesn't want to be left alone. It's like, you think you'd know by now not to, but it's like, well, I'm not that far away. It's like, well, one of the last times you left Donna alone, you turned around and she was kind of pseudo killed, but you were able to undo that, because funny enough, that was the first River Song episode, because she specifically, well, I mean, it was essentially the version of her dying, but I forgot what the whole thing was. She got turned into something, and it was kind of like death, but not really. So they were able to undo it, sure, but stuff can happen when your back is turned, essentially. But I love that reveal where it's like the Doctor's talking to Donna. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then we cut to the Doctor. I was like, they're not talking to the real each other. I was like, that's interesting. And then the Doctor started, because they were asking each other these interesting questions where the Doctor was talking to Donna about Wilf, and the other Donna was asking the Doctor about, maybe it was about Gallifrey? I can't remember. Oh, no. The conversation, interestingly enough, was about the TARDIS, which I thought was so interesting. Because, I forgot. Like, they both had these really interesting conversations. Because I was about to, like, brush over. Like, Donna had this really interesting perspective of, you know, if we're stuck here, how long do you think it's going to be with my mom and Rose and Sean waiting for me? She's like, Rose will come back, every once in a while to kind of check on, to see, the TARDIS there. They'll wait for like a day or something. Then maybe they'll come back, and then eventually Rose will move on, kind of live her life. Even saying Sean, he will come back like all the time, and she even kind of puts out the perspective of what Wilf would do, and she kind of nails it exactly. But then, like, the Doctor has this conversation about what will happen to the TARDIS. It's like, well, where does the TARDIS go when it runs? And it'll be in some, like, beachside area, and people will start worshipping it, but then they'll start to fear it and try and burn it down, and then it'll be turned into a monument, and then it'll become, like, a small part of all these skyscrapers in a city that's built around it. It becomes, like, this small thing in the center, and eventually, like anything, with enough time, any civilization and thing will crumble, and then they will have the TARDIS again kind of back where it started. So it's just in regards of when it was first discovered and worshipped, like it'll be back to where it was in the beginning. Like it all kind of, it's a little not Ouroboros in that full capacity, but more so just like like the cycle of things repeating themselves kind of. And I thought that was such an interesting conversation. But then the reveal of, oh, that's not the real Doctor, that's not the real Donna because their arms are too long. And I'm like, then we start getting into like the weird, like uncomfortable uncanniness of this episode. And it's like, okay, they're copies, they're chasing you, they're getting bigger, they're like morphing into each other to the point they like block up the whole space. Did Donna say Sean reference like, oh, we were watching, did she say Venom movies? That's all I heard. Maybe I'm stupid. Do correct me in the comments down below. It sounded like she said, oh yeah, Sean was always talking about how when watching those Venom movies, how, like I said, maybe it was something else, but I was like, did they make reference to the Venom movies? It sounded like that to me, but I feel so stupid. But it feels like it can't be what Donna said. But it's like, yeah, this whole thing of you only have a certain amount of mass. There's no way you could like grow to such a like exponential like growth like this. But these things, they haven't figured out limbs because it's like, all right, the arms are too long, or we haven't really figured out the jaw yet. But then they continue to run away from them as they kind of sink back down and are figuring it out and trying to properly shape themselves. And then they get chased, and then they're separated, and then we had that beautiful scene of like, nope, they're not with the real each other again, but now it's like, well, how do we prove who's who? And I'm like, oh, I love situations like this, because you're like, I don't know what's real and what isn't, especially with the Doctor. Because at first you're almost like, is that Doctor with this Donna real? Because he's like, oh, let's take off the tie. The moment I take off the tie, we'll run into another, like, it must be connected. Like, they don't know, like, fabric and stuff. So the fact is we take off the tie, it won't be a fabric. It'll be kind of connected to him because they shapeshifted into it. And Donna was making this whole point about where I was born. And the Doctor's like, well, you were born here. And she's like, actually, I was born here. He's like, well, I wouldn't know that because you've never told me. And she's like, right, that would make sense that you wouldn't know that. Then the other Doctor and Donna are having this, conversation about, she says like, oh, while I was Dr. Donna, I got to look inside your head. Because he was like, oh, where am I from? And she's like, Gallifrey. But it's like, but that's not real. Right. And the Doctor like hesitated. He was like, wait, what? It's like, while I was Dr. Donna, I saw into your head for the past 15 years of we were separated and what you've been through. And you're like, interesting. Because I've talked about this previously. I know some people were kind of talking about retconning the Timeless Child thing. It's part of Doctor Who canon now, so I don't see you doing that. I think it's a really interesting story. I think some elements of the Timeless Child stuff didn't work for some people, but I think the concept is interesting. I enjoyed a lot of it, and I'm really fine with that, but I think generally speaking, some fans weren't too happy with how that played out, so they were retconning doesn't mean it has to be completely going away. It's just, hey, maybe you think it's one thing, and then maybe it's like, oh, we thought it was one thing, and we shifted to be, no, it means something else. Just kind of like the whole situation with Scarlet Witch. WandaVision retcon certain things. It's more like an interesting retcon where it's like, instead of like deleting something, you add perspective and lore to something. So it's like an interesting retcon where instead of getting rid of something and changing it, you're changing it by adding more context to it. So maybe it'll be something like that. But now it's like, is this thing just reading Donna's mind, or did Donna really, because that mean Donna does know about the truth about the doctor, the whole timeless child situation about the doctor not knowing where they're really from. Especially because of the whole conversation about the doctor not wanting to really talk about it, and the flux situation in particular. It's like, right, half the universe got obliterated. It's like, that wasn't your fault. And the doctor's like, I know, but just the frustration of it. And it's like, are you really Donna? And they were about to hug, but then it's like, oh, I couldn't keep it together. And it's just like, geez, this thing is messing with. And just to see the doctor, I mean, David Tennant had his serious moments. He wasn't all jokey, but like to see him so filled with rage the way he was, like banging against the wall, so angry and so frustrated, because it's not just the Donna and their current circumstances, it's also just a frustration of not really knowing yourself. And it's just, especially comes at a time where you have a familiar face, and maybe that's also supposed to be an irony of it. You have a face that you're familiar with at a point where you have lost sense of who you are. And maybe that's going to be the real reveal of why you have this face now. Not only just because of the Donna of it all. You needed to be reunited with someone who knows you when you feel like you don't know yourself. And maybe, I didn't think about it at the time, but the Timeless Child stuff has kind of got me thinking about that, especially in this regard. So maybe that's a little bit of that essence and element of what's going on there. But yeah, the doctor found out that Donna was fake, and Donna, who was going on this whole diatribe about like, oh yeah, like my mom was like 9 months pregnant with me, went to go see, her and my dad went to go see her sister. Oh, but did my aunt, what was it, Iris, go and see them? But it's like, no. And my mom is basically like, saying that I was kind of a problem the moment I was born. And she's like, yeah, I'm here at the edge of the universe, realizing I still am dealing with that even at this point in my life, here at the end of the universe. And then also Donna's like, yeah, you're not the doctor, because where's your tire? He's like, oh, you saw me take it off. It's like, yeah, but it's not on the ground anymore, even though you took it off. And the doctor's like, oh, right. When you take something off, it doesn't just stop existing. So this thing ended up being a fake. It's contorting. It's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. You're such a nuisance. Like, how does he travel with you? So then it's this situation of they do eventually meet up, but then it's two others again. I'm like, dude, this is getting ridiculous. Now it's like, how do we tell each other apart? Well, I'm talking fast, so I got to be the real doctor. It's like, no, you're only talking fast because you're just copying me. And so Donna's like, okay, this is a nightmare, but honestly, not too shabby considering like I look good. And the other Donna's like, I won't argue with that. So now it's a thing of, well, Donna's like, I'm feeling left behind. I'm not the stupid one. It's like, oh, so you think you're the stupid one? It's like, oh, that's Donna, my Donna. Which is interesting and ironic considering that doctor was like, oh, you're my Donna, which in actuality it's Donna because that was the fake doctor. But he's like, no, Donna might think she's stupid, but I would say at the same time, she thinks she's brilliant because that's what humans are. They're complex. They can think both. I guess it'd be the same equivalency of like, I mean, humanity, like the way we operate is kind of a little bit of an oxymoron, It's like you can kind of love and hate yourself at the same time. I would almost say it's maybe not an apt comparison, but I think that's another parallel you could draw. So the doctor and Donna found the real Dems, and we kind of find out more about these beings. They came from the nothing, and they had brought that up earlier, but the reason why they are the way they are is because even though it was all these miles away, they were infected by, time doesn't really pass for them, but they were still here in the nothingness, the no light. But even in that nothingness, they were radiated by basically all the negative, all the hate, all the war, the blood spilled, found its way to them and it shaped them. We are basically the reason why we're so evil and bad is because we are a manifestation of these circumstances of all the terrible stuff from your universe came to us and it molded us into kind of what you would consider bad. But it's like, yeah, humanity's more than that. Like, we love and all this, but the other Donna was like, yeah, but love doesn't travel nearly as far as hate. And I love it becomes a situation of like, okay, so they're able to copy us because basically they're reading our minds. So like the more we think, the more we're producing like adrenaline and stuff like that, the more we're thinking. That's what's making them be able to copy us. So all we have to do is not think what Donna was like, oh, that's easy for me, but what about you? It's like, yeah, the doctor thinks a lot. So trying their best not to think. But then like I love that the copies are like, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about the door that opened 3 years ago and never opened it? Like throwing all these mysteries, and Donna's like, come on, stay strong. And the doctor's like, oh, but why did this? And it's like, oh, what is that noise? And they end up finding out it is the captain, the pilot of the ship. They're the ones who went outside and, killed themselves because they found out the truth about what was happening. And so the captain, it's like, right, you were already in the process of copying the captain, so why did they do this? It's because the captain wanted to stop them. It's like, I know that I might be out here adrift, but I cannot let you back into wherever we're from, because I assume it's still in the same universe. So wherever I'm from, I can't let you come back to the universe with me. So because you will bring nothing but destruction and war. Like, you are beings born only of that hate and terribleness, that we can't have that in our universe because you'll run amok, because you don't have that duality. All you are is the bad, and you have none of the good to balance you on, like a yin yang type of situation. We finally figured this whole thing out, because I hadn't talked about it, but the robot that's slowly moving, you figured it had some role and purpose, because it's like it's moving extremely slow. So we find out that the captain created a plan basically to blow up this ship, but so that they couldn't read it, the captain's thought they killed themselves, but also set something in motion that was so slow that these things can't process it, because they process stuff based on speed, and because something's moving so slow, they can't read it. So the shifting of the ship, the way it's like structuring, and the words, like no one being able to kind of figure out, which I even love. The doctor's like, oh my god, it's a countdown. He's like, I guessed it, which he did guess pretty early on. It must be like a countdown, but he never pieced it together, because he was literally looking at the numbers, and he literally was counting down like, oh, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, but he never really, he even says like, oh, I never said it out loud. So it was kind of interesting, and never, like, even that is the irony, that he was at the console counting down these numbers, never correlating it with the numbers because they were hearing them so slowly, because it's meant to be so slow. It's in like comprehensible to these creatures. This has been a 3-year process, and it's like, that's why the TARDIS brought us here in the final act of this, to make sure this all happens, because this needs to happen, because these beings cannot make their way to our universe. So it becomes a situation of they're trying to stop the robot, because it's going to be the one detonating. That's where that's why you have this slow robot walking down the hallway very slowly to get to this button to press it and detonate the whole ship. And so they're trying to stop it, and the Doctor and Donna are doing the best they can to try and stop it. But luckily, because the situation is what it is, the TARDIS shows up, and it's like the whole Miss Bean situation, her being that, because this all deals with the song Wild Blue Yonder, because it's like, oh, it's not a, it sounds so joyous, but it's kind of a war song, which is so ironic, because there's that song, I've seen the meme of it, I don't know the song's name, but it's that iconic song that it was initially meant to be a, not war cry, but it was like meant to be a song that was meant to kind of rally the troops for war, but now it ends up being used in a more, it's been associated, in more modern times with like slapstick comedy of like, I think it was that, if I remember correctly. I can't remember if it's that or something else. It might have been, but because it was like a meme I've seen of it being like, oh, it's kind of messed up. Your song was one thing, and then over the years, outside of your own control, it ends up being represented by something else. I mean, that's kind of art for you. Like it can be interpreted by different people depending on who gets their hands on it. And just, it's so interesting how someone else can interpret your art one way and kind of make it synonymous with one thing, even though it was meant to be something else. Just, it's interesting how that works. So it almost feels like it's supposed to be kind of a little bit of a comparison in that regard, because Donna was talking about her Mrs. Bean teacher being like, no, it's not a song of war, it's a song of like joyousness or whatever. Like she was kind of putting her own spin to it, even though, because because she was saying like Wilf was kind of not the biggest fan of children learning that song, considering him being a soldier and everything. It makes sense why he had that perspective on it versus like maybe a music teacher or whoever who'd have a different perspective on it. But it comes down to the Doctor getting inside the TARDIS, which I love him pushing it pushing off on it like with one leg like it was a skateboard or whatever. But gets to the Donnas and it's like, right, why is Miss Bean funny? And one's like, oh, because it's the name of a vegetable, and grabs it. And the other Donna's like, I don't know, it just is. And I'm like, the other Donna's trying so hard and pleading. I'm like, wait, is this supposed to be a last minute twist to just be like, oh, like the twist was what it was, but I thought for a second, I was like, are they messing with us just to make us think, second guess it? But it's like, no, it really was Donna still back there. The machine pushes the button, the fake Doctor gets killed, but the other Doctor, the real Doctor comes back with the fake Donna and dumps her off because he's like, hey, yeah, your arms are too long. It was almost close to perfecting her, but the problem was that something was off with the wrist. The wrist wasn't the right size or whatever. It didn't quite 100% nail Donna. So the devil's in the details. So luckily, dropped her off, grabbed the real Donna, and got her out of there just as it was exploding. So it all worked out in the end. They brought up something interesting. They keep laying the groundwork for, and I wonder if this is going to be something that comes up. I'm curious if it's going to come up in the third special, because we had the whole meat situation of like, oh yeah, I'm going to tell my boss about another two-hearted being, like the chances of that. It's like, oh, that's cryptic. I don't like cryptic. That was weird. But now we also get another one at the end of this episode where the Doctor feels weird about that situation because he did that whole salt thing of like, oh, vampires, demons, and so on and so forth can't cross salt without counting. It's like, yeah, that was a superstition. It's like, yes, but things can be true. At the same time, it could be superstition, but can also be truth. Just like Donna can be both stupid and brilliant at the same time. So one Donna ended up like trying to actually count all of it, but then was just like, oh, I know you're BSing, and blew the salt away. But is that supposed to be the reason why salt protects you from like demons and ghosts and stuff like that? I mean, all the years in Supernatural, they never got specific like that. Maybe that's just supposed to be the superstition of it, because it doesn't even have to be like, I don't think it has to be a special type of salt. I think any type of salt, maybe there's something inside of salt, but maybe that is what's supposed to be the thing of like, that's the superstition behind it, is that I've never heard that before now. But I'm going on this diatribe, but the Doctor was like, yeah, but maybe it wasn't a good idea to do something superstitious related at a point at the edge of the universe where the realm between reality and falsehood, like between what's real and fake, that line is so thin that it's like, yeah, but it leaves them with a bad feeling. It almost feels like, because I introduced that at the end of the universe, it does feel like we know there's things out there in the darkness that maybe, just maybe, setting that up there might be able to kind of bend the rules for whatever's out there at the edge of the universe. Feels like there could be some correlation there. I don't know if those things are like dead or whether they were just kind of blown back into the darkness because they don't have a form anymore. They were formless until they took a form trying to get to the Doctor, because I'd skipped over it, but the whole reason why they were trying to become the Doctor and Donna was because they overheard about the TARDIS. It's like, oh, if the TARDIS will come back, if it thinks if we become completely you, the TARDIS won't be able to tell the difference, and we'll be able to leave, and because the ship is stuck in neutral, it's just meant to drift there because it's meant to keep them from going back to the universe. But then we had that conversation between the Doctor and Donna. Doctor brings up like, hey, so the other Donna was bringing up something about apparently you saw some stuff when you were Dr. Donna. And she was like, yeah, but it was too much for me to comprehend. But it's like, so what was it? She's always like, oh yeah, some stuff. It's like, yeah, but tell me about it. Like, what did you go through? It's like this and that. And it's like, it was a lot. And the Doctor didn't really, especially because the Doctor definitely didn't get too specific about the whole aspect of not knowing where they're from and that whole Gallifrey, Thomas Child thing. So kind of left that, but it's like you could definitely tell Donna might not be able to comprehend it all because it's too much for a human mind to handle, but these things weren't human, so their minds could handle it. But I think on some level Donna's probably hiding the fact is at least some of that did stick with her, And it's that thing of, you don't want to prod, you want someone to feel comfortable enough to bring it to your attention. So she's nudging a little bit, but she's not asking the questions that she probably specifically can and wants to ask about, but she doesn't want to push too much. But they do come back to present day. It's like, oh, we missed it by a day or two. And lo and behold, who's waiting for them? Wilf. I was like, no. I was like, dude. Especially when he was like, hey, oh my God, I never thought I'd see your face again after all these years. I was like, that was such a gut punch line. It's like, ah. Because if you didn't see, I was talking about this last episode. I was like, the fact is they kind of wrote around the actor who plays Wilf, Bernard Cribbins. I was like, okay. More often than not, when you're doing that type of situation, it's more like you would probably be like, oh, the character died off screen because like the actor might not be around or anymore, right? But I was like, I wasn't quite sure, because I was like, why wouldn't the actor be just here if that's the case? But the actor was obviously getting older in age at the time and stuff like that. But I'd left a comment saying this because I didn't want to look into it because, like I said, I'm weird about looking into stuff related to death and stuff like that. But the actor Bernard Cribbins did sadly pass away last year. So because I knew he passed, I looked and saw that sadly he had passed of July last year. I didn't know what the filming was like for this, so I didn't know how much filming they got done ahead of time. But it seems like, I'm assuming he's in the tail end of this, and I'd assume he's in maybe the entirety of the next special, The Giggle. But it was just still like a gut punch. I was like, that's sad. Because I have not, even though the marathons were happening, I have not revisited season 4 or anything related to Donna. Like, her introduction was like the Runaway Bride, and that was like a Christmas special back in the day, in between series 2 and 3, if I remember correctly, was their first introduction, and then obviously like running into her in series 4. But I have not revisited any of that. This is my first time with anything with the Doctor and Donna again. I just was so packed I didn't have time to kind of revisit all that, even though like there were plenty of outlets and opportunities to do that. But either way, the reason why I'm also bringing this up is because it reminds me most recently of like the Lance Reddick of it all. If you're unfamiliar, Lance Reddick is an American actor who passed away a couple months ago this year. You might know him from the shows like I've never seen it, but I'm pretty sure he was in The Wire. The thing I was first familiar with him from is my first introduction to him was Fringe. If you've seen the show Bosch, I'm not well versed in it because I haven't seen them, but I know he's prominent in the John Wick movies. But yeah, he's an actor. You look him up, you'll be like, oh, it's that guy. Well, most recently, probably like last month, there was a Bosch Legacy season 2 finale, and he was a prominent character in the original Bosch series. And he makes a cameo appearance in the season finale, and I had to pause because it was such a gut punch because I wasn't expecting him to be in anything at all, but it most likely was something he filmed before he passed, and I think the same thing's happening here in Bernard Cribbins' case. It makes it even sadder, like I said, because of that line of like, oh, I never thought I'd see your face again. So there's a beautiful sweetness where it's like, it's sad that you're gone, but you having this moment, like, actors probably bump into each other, keep in contact over the years, so I'd like to believe that, they talked in some shape or form, but like on screen, these characters being together again was beautiful. And just like, oh, I never thought I'd get to see that face again after all these years. And those lines hit harder, especially because it's sad too, because as I brought up, the actor died, Bernard, he passed away last year. So it's been like almost a year and a half since he passed away. So it just makes it even harder, just being like, oh man. So it's that bittersweet thing of like, it's sad that you're going, but I'm also glad that you were able to be a part of this too. It's just like, man, that had to happen. Like, his passing must have been like, once again, I don't know what the scheduling was like for this, but like, it had to be pretty soon after. I mean, it's sad, and it's just like, it was such a beautiful moment. Donna hugging him and then the doctor hugging him and everything. But it's like, oh, I'm glad you're here, doctor. I told Sean, my daughter, and Rose all to hide out while I keep an eye on things. But it's like, yeah, the world is in danger. Now, what danger this is, what the giggle involves, I have no idea. Obviously, the preview went out yesterday, but much like this, I didn't watch the preview for this. I'm not going to watch the preview for that. I just want to go into it knowing as little as possible. But the next special is the final special at least of. I think the holiday special still. I don't know if that is technically separate from the 60th anniversary. It's still taking place in the 60th anniversary, so. But at the very least, this will be the final Donna and Tennant. Well, Tennant and Tate ones. So what that fully entails, I don't know, and I don't want to know. I'm excited to find out how this all plays out, how their story comes, how things end for them when it's all said and done, and how it sets up, Ncuti Gatwa's doctor and what that all means. Obviously, we'll get a better idea of that in a holiday special, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm excited to see where this third and I guess technically final special will take us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.